Picture this. You're in a room with someone and they say, "It's a bit cold in here, isn't it?"
So you agree? Yes, it is quite cold.
And then nothing happens. There's this awkward pause. And you realize they weren't just making an observation, they wanted you to close the window.
But they never actually said that.
Exactly. So why didn't they just say, "Could you close the window?" Why all the hints?
This is one of the most frustrating things for English learners. Native speakers often don't say what they mean directly. They hint, they suggest, they imply.
And if you're not used to it, you miss the real message completely.
Today we're diving into indirect English, why we use it, how to recognize it, and how you can use it naturally without feeling like you're playing guessing game.
I'm Lucy.
And I'm James. This is Plain English. Let's start with a fundamental question. Why is English often so indirect?
Yes, because in some languages, being direct is respectful, it's clear and honest. So why does English go the opposite way?
It comes down to what English-speaking cultures value in communication. There are three main things: softness, choice, and avoiding pressure.
Can you break those down?
Sure, softness means making your communication feel gentle rather than harsh. Instead of "close the window," you say, "Could you close the window?" It's the same request, but it feels softer.
And choice?
Choice means giving the other person a sense of autonomy. When you phrase something as a question, "Would you mind closing the window?" you're technically giving them the option to say no, even though in practice they probably won't.
So it's like you're respecting their freedom to choose?
Exactly. And the third value is avoiding pressure. English speakers generally don't like to feel pressured or forced, so we use indirect language to reduce that feeling of obligation.
That's so interesting. So it's not about being unclear, it's about being considerate.
Right, and here's the crucial point. Indirect language isn't unclear to native speakers. We all understand the social code. When someone says, "It's cold in here," we know they're probably suggesting we close the window or turn up the heating.
But for learners, that code isn't obvious.
Exactly. You're learning the words and grammar, but nobody's teaching you this hidden layer of social meaning.
Can you give me some examples of how we make English indirect?
Of course, let's start with requests. The most direct way is, "Can you help me?" That's already fairly polite in English.
But we can make it even softer.
Yes, "Could you help me?" is more polite because "could" is more tentative than "can." Then you can go further. "Would you be able to help me?" Or "I was wondering if you could help me."
Those sound like so much longer.
They are, but each extra word adds politeness and reduces directness. You're creating distance between yourself and the request.
What about, "Do you mind if—" I hear that one a lot.
That's a perfect example of indirectness. Instead of saying, "I want to open the window," you say, "Do you mind if I open the window?" You're framing it around their potential objection rather than your desire.
So you're making it about them, not about you?
In a way, yes, you're acknowledging that your action might affect them and you're checking if that's okay. It's very considerate, but it can feel roundabout if you're not used to it.
Is there a pattern to when we use this indirect language?
Generally, the more indirect you are, the more polite you sound, but there's a balance. With close friends, you can be quite direct. With strangers, bosses, or formal situations, you'd be more indirect. Let's pause and break down some common indirect phrases you'll hear all the time.
Yes, because these phrases sound complicated, but they're actually quite standard.
First off, we have, "I was wondering if." This is incredibly common for polite requests. "I was wondering if you could send me that file," or "I was wondering if you're free on Tuesday."
Why was wondering instead of am wondering?
Using the past tense creates even more distance and politeness. It sounds more tentative, less direct. It's a subtle signal that you're being extra polite.
What's another one?
Would it be possible to? This is very formal and polite. Would it be possible to reschedule our meeting? You're not demanding anything. You're asking about possibility.
It sounds quite businesslike, doesn't it?
It does. You'd use this in professional settings or when asking for something that might be inconvenient.
What about you wouldn't happen to? That one always sounds so tentative.
It is. You wouldn't happen to know where the nearest coffee shop is. You're making your question sound almost apologetic, like you don't really expect them to help but thought you'd ask anyway.
Why does that work?
Because you're minimizing the imposition. You're suggesting it's unlikely they can help, which makes it feel lower pressure for them to admit if they can't. Here's the key thing about all these phrases. The grammar matters less than the tone. You can say, "I was wondering if you could help me," in a very flat, demanding tone, and it won't sound polite at all.
So it's how you say it, not just what you say.
That's exactly correct. The indirect phrasing gives you a framework for politeness, but your tone and delivery bring it to life.
Okay, so we've established that English uses indirect language for politeness. But why is this so hard for learners?
There are several reasons. First, many learners are taught to be clear and direct in their communication. Teachers emphasize being understood, which often means being explicit.
So they learn to say exactly what they mean.
Right, which makes sense from a language learning perspective. You want to be clear. But then they enter real English-speaking environments and discover that being too direct can sound rude or blunt.
That must be so confusing.
Yes, it is. They're doing exactly what they were taught, but the social response isn't what they expected.
What's another reason indirect English is difficult?
Directness feels efficient. If you want the window closed, saying "close the window" gets the job done in 3 words. Adding all the polite cushioning feels inefficient and unnecessarily complicated.
But it's not just about efficiency, is it?
No, it's about social comfort. English speakers would generally rather take a few extra seconds to phrase something politely than risk sounding rude or demanding.
What about understanding the hidden meaning? That seems really tricky.
This is where learners really struggle. Someone says, "We should probably leave soon," and they're not sure. Is this a suggestion? A request? Are we actually leaving or just discussing it?
How do you know?
Context does most of the work. If someone says, "We should probably leave soon," while you're at a party and they're holding their coat, they're ready to go. If they say it while sitting comfortably on the sofa without moving, it's probably just a vague comment.
Though you have to read the situation, not just the words.
Exactly. Body language, context, and tone give you the real meaning. The words are just part of the message.
Can you give me another example of hidden meaning?
Sure, if someone says, "That's an interesting idea," they might genuinely think it's interesting, but depending on their tone, they might actually mean, "I don't like that idea, but I'm being polite."
Oh no! How do you tell the difference?
Again, tone and context. If their voice goes up and they sound engaged, it's probably genuine. If their voice is flat or they quickly change the subject, they're probably not convinced.
This is like learning a whole secret language, English within English.
In a way, it is. And here's something that might make you feel better. Even native speakers misread indirect language sometimes.
Really?
Absolutely. Someone says "it's fine," and you're not sure if they mean it's actually fine or they're upset but being polite about it. We've all been there, and it confuses a lot of us.
So it's not just learners who find this confusing?
Not at all. The difference is that native speakers have years of practice reading these signals in their own culture, but it's still not perfect, and misunderstandings happen.
That's actually quite reassuring. Okay, time for another language pause. Let's compare some direct and indirect versions side by side, shall we?
Great idea. Let's start with a basic command. Direct version, "close the door."
And indirect?
Could we close the door, or would you mind closing the door? Notice how we've changed it from a command to a question.
And that makes it feel less bossy.
Much less. The question format gives the other person a sense of choice, even though realistically they're probably going to close the door.
What about asking for help?
Direct, I want help. Indirect, I was hoping you could help me. Or, would you be able to help me if you have time?
The indirect version is so much longer.
It is, but notice what it does. It softens the request, acknowledges their time and effort, and makes it feel optional.
Does this work the same way in all situations?
Not quite. The level of indirectness depends on social dynamics. With your boss, you'd be quite indirect. With close friends, you can be more direct.
Can you give an example?
Sure. To your boss, would it be possible to leave a bit early on Friday? To your close friend, hey, can I leave early on Friday? I have a date.
So you adjust based on the relationship.
Exactly. And here's an interesting point. Being too indirect with close friends can actually feel weird or distant.
Really?
Yes, if you say to your best friend, I was wondering if it might be possible for you to perhaps lend me your book, they'd probably laugh and say, just ask me normally.
So indirect isn't always better. It depends on the situation.
Precisely. The key is matching your level of directness to the social context. Formal situations and strangers require more indirectness. Casual situations and close relationships allow more directness.
Okay, James, practical question. How can learners actually use indirect English naturally without overthinking every sentence?
First principle, start indirect and only go direct if needed. It's safer to be too polite than too blunt in English.
So when in doubt, be more indirect or polite.
Yes, that's the safer way. You can always become more direct if someone says, just tell me what you need. But if you start too direct and offend someone, it's harder to recover.
That's good advice. What else?
Match the other person's communication style. If they're being quite direct with you, you can mirror that. If they're being very polite and indirect, follow their lead.
So you're adapting to them.
Exactly. Communication is a two-way street. Pay attention to how they phrase things and adjust your own style accordingly.
What about those softening words we've talked about before? Just a bit, maybe?
Those are your friends when you're trying to be indirect. Could you maybe help me sounds softer than could you help me. I'm just wondering sounds lighter than I'm wondering.
And a bit?
I'm a bit confused feels less intense than I'm confused. These little words reduce the weight of what you're saying.
So you're making everything feel smaller and less demanding.
That's a great way to put it. You're shrinking the imposition, making your needs feel smaller and more manageable.
Is there a danger of sounding too uncertain, though?
There can be, especially in professional contexts where you need to project confidence. The key is balance. Be indirect enough to be polite, but not so indirect that people aren't sure what you want.
How do you find that balance?
Practice and observation. Listen to how native speakers in your field or social circle communicate. Do they use a lot of indirect language, or are they more straightforward? Adapt to that norm.
Any final pieces of advice to help learners feel better about all this indirectness?
Yes, I have actually. Indirect English isn't about hiding what you mean. It's about giving people space. You're showing respect for their time, their feelings, and their autonomy.
So it's actually quite considerate when you think about it that way.
That's the underlying aim, yes. You're not being weak or unclear. You're being socially intelligent and creating comfortable interactions for everyone involved.
All right, let's wrap up what we've learned about indirect English.
First key point, English-speaking cultures value softness, choice, and avoiding pressure. That's why we use indirect language, not to be unclear, but to be considerate.
Second, common indirect phrases like, I was wondering if, and would it be possible to, are standard politeness tools. They're not complicated, they're just part of the social code.
Third, learners find indirect English hard because they're taught to be clear and direct. But in English, being too direct can sound rude, even when you don't mean it that way.
Fourth, understanding indirect English requires reading context, tone, and body language, not just the words. Even native speakers sometimes misread these signals, so don't worry if you do too.
Fifth, practical advice. Start indirect and go direct only if needed. Match the other person's style and use softening words like just, maybe, and a bit to reduce pressure.
And finally, remember that indirect English is about giving people space and showing respect. It's not hiding your meaning, it's being socially intelligent.
Here's your awareness challenge for this week. Notice when native speakers use indirect requests or suggestions. Listen for phrases like, we should probably, or it's a bit, and see if you can identify the hidden request.
You'll be amazed how often we do this once you start paying attention.
If there are other confusing everyday English moments you'd like us to explain, let us know in the comments. We love hearing from you.
Thanks for listening to Plain English. Check out our playlist for other episodes from James and me.
See you next time.